My name is Eric Pierce. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my life, I've believed in two things: hard work and loyalty. As the founder of a thriving marketing firm, I've built my career on those principles, turning what started as a two-man operation into one of the most sought-after agencies in the city. Success wasn't handed to me. I worked for it. I sacrificed weekends, late nights, and even some relationships along the way. But I never doubted it was worth it. My clients trusted me, my employees respected me, and my wife, Rachel, well, I thought she admired me too. Rachel and I met when we were both in our 20s. She was magnetic, sharp, charming, and drop-dead gorgeous. I knew from the moment I met her that she was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and command attention without even trying. And for years, I loved that about her. But Rachel didn't want to work. She wanted the freedom to enjoy life without the grind of a 9-to-5 job. I didn't mind. I made more than enough for both of us. I encouraged her to pursue her passions, to travel, to indulge in hobbies. And she did. Pilates, painting classes, yoga retreats. Rachel never lacked for something to do or the means to do it. To the outside world, we were the picture of success. The wealthy businessman, his beautiful wife. And I'll admit, I liked the image. It felt good to walk into a room with her on my arm, to know that everyone envied the life we had built together. But beneath the surface, cracks were starting to form. As my business grew, so did the demands on my time. I spent more hours at the office than I did at home, and when I wasn't working, I was networking or managing our investments. Rachel started to complain that I wasn't around enough, that I didn't see her anymore. "I miss us, Eric," she'd say during our increasingly rare dinners together. "You're always so busy." "I'm building something for us," I'd reply. "This is what it takes." For a while, I thought she understood. But looking back, maybe I should have seen the warning signs, the restless energy, the new clothes, the nights out with her friends that started to stretch later and later. I told myself it was harmless. After all, she deserved to have her fun. It wasn't until the night I found out about the other man that I realized just how wrong I had been. It started with a feeling. For weeks, Rachel had been different, distracted, distant. She wasn't outright cold, but there was something about the way she carried herself that felt off, like her attention was always somewhere else. She'd started dressing up more, even for casual outings. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, now seemed glued to her hand. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I told myself she was just restless. Maybe she was bored or going through a phase. But the unease gnawed at me, and no matter how much I tried to brush it off, it refused to go away. Then came the night everything fell apart. Rachel had told me she was meeting her friend Danielle for drinks downtown. It wasn't unusual. Rachel loved her nights out, and I rarely questioned her plans. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Her tone was too casual, her smile too rehearsed. "You sure you don't mind?" she asked as she slipped on her heels. "No," I said, keeping my expression neutral. "Go have fun." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air as she grabbed her purse and walked out the door. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I grabbed my jacket and my keys. I didn't know where she was going, but I had a hunch. Rachel wasn't the type to drive halfway across the city for drinks with a friend. I knew her favorite spots, the places she frequented when she wanted to relax or be seen. It didn't take long to find her car parked outside an upscale restaurant we used to visit together. I parked a block away and walked to the restaurant, my pulse pounding in my ears. The warm glow of the dining room spilled onto the sidewalk, and through the large windows, I saw couples seated at candlelit tables, laughing and talking over glasses of wine. And then I saw her. Rachel was sitting at a corner table, her back to me. She was leaning forward, her head tilted slightly to the side, laughing at something the man across from her had said. He was younger, mid-30s maybe, with neatly combed hair and a tailored suit that screamed money. For a moment, I just stood there, staring through the glass. It didn't feel real. The way she smiled at him, the way her hand rested casually on the table as if waiting for him to take it. It was a side of her I hadn't seen in years, and it wasn't meant for me. I wanted to storm inside, to confront her right there in front of everyone. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was pride. I wasn't going to cause a scene. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of them through the window. I wanted proof that I wasn't imagining things, that this wasn't just some innocent dinner between friends. And then I left. The drive home was a blur. Anger and humiliation churned in my stomach, each thought more painful than the last. This wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the sheer audacity of it. Rachel knew how much I had sacrificed for her, how hard I had worked to give her the life she wanted. And this was how she repaid me? By sneaking off with some younger, flashier version of me? By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were trembling. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house we had shared for years, the place where we had built a life together. And in that moment, I made the decision to get back at her. If Rachel wanted to act like I didn't matter, I'd show her just how wrong she was. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her at that table, laughing with him. Her smile, her posture, the way she leaned in like he was the only person in the world. It all replayed in my mind like a broken record. But by the time the sun rose, my anger had burned through the humiliation, leaving only cold, calculated resolve. I wasn't going to let this slide. Rachel had disrespected me, and worse, she thought I wouldn't find out. She thought she could play me for a fool, sneaking around while I was too busy working to notice. Well, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The first thing I did was gather evidence. The photo I'd taken through the restaurant window was clear enough, but I wanted more. I needed something undeniable, something she couldn't talk her way out of. Rachel had always been careful with her phone, but she wasn't as smart as she thought she was. While she was in the shower the next morning, I went through her purse and found the receipt from the restaurant. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, and a dessert. Hardly the kind of bill you'd rack up during a girls' night out. I snapped a picture of it with my phone, then carefully placed it back where I found it. Later that evening, while she was distracted watching a show in the living room, I synced her phone to our shared cloud account. It didn't take long to find the texts. There they were, dozens of messages between Rachel and Jake, the man from the restaurant. They were flirtatious, suggestive, and painfully obvious. One message in particular stood out. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My stomach turned, but I kept scrolling, screenshotting everything as I went. By the time I was done, I had a folder full of evidence that left no room for doubt. The next step was deciding how to use it. Confronting Rachel directly felt too easy, too simple. She needed to feel the same humiliation I had felt, the same sting of betrayal. And that was when the idea hit me. If Rachel could go on a date with another man behind my back, then why couldn't I do the same? And better yet, why not do it in front of her? The plan started with a phone call to Sophia. Sophia was a client I had worked with on a recent project. She was smart, ambitious, and gorgeous in a way that turned heads wherever she went. I'd always gotten the sense that she was interested in me, though I had never acted on it. But now I was ready to explore that possibility. "Sophia," I said when she picked up, "this might sound a little strange, but are you free for dinner tomorrow night?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Dinner?" she repeated, her voice curious. "Yes," I said, keeping my tone casual. "There's a place I think you'd like, and I'd really enjoy your company." To my relief, she agreed. That night, I put the final piece of the plan into place. "Hey," I said to Rachel as we sat down for dinner, "I'll be working late tomorrow. A new client wants to discuss some last-minute changes to their campaign." Rachel barely looked up from her plate. "Okay, have fun." The irony wasn't lost on me. She had no idea what was coming. The next evening, I dressed carefully. I chose a tailored navy suit, polished black shoes, and a silver tie that matched the cufflinks Rachel had given me for our anniversary last year. There was a certain poetic irony in wearing them tonight. As I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my collar, I allowed myself a small smile. Tonight wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. At exactly 7:30, I pulled up to Sophia's apartment. She was waiting for me on the front steps, wearing a sleek black dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and the moment she stepped into the car, the scent of her perfume filled the air. "You look amazing," I said, meaning it. She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "So do you. Where are we headed?" "You'll see," I replied, pulling out of the driveway. The restaurant was buzzing with the low hum of conversation and the soft clinking of glasses when we arrived. I scanned the room as the hostess led us to our table, my pulse quickening when I spotted them. Rachel and Jake were seated in the same corner booth as the night before. She was dressed to the nines, her hair swept into an elegant updo, her laugh ringing out like music over the ambient noise. Jake leaned in close, a smug smile on his face as he whispered something that made her blush. For a moment, I felt a pang of something, anger, maybe, or regret, but it was fleeting. Tonight, she was about to experience the same humiliation she had so carelessly inflicted on me. The hostess led us to a table directly across the room, perfectly positioned with a clear view of Rachel and Jake. As Sophia and I sat down, I caught Rachel glancing in our direction. Her expression was unreadable at first, but then her eyes widened slightly, recognition flickering across her face. I smiled politely as though I hadn't seen her, and turned my attention to Sophia. We ordered drinks, and I made a point to keep the conversation light and engaging. Sophia was easy to talk to, intelligent, witty, and refreshingly confident. She leaned forward as she spoke, her hand occasionally brushing mine, and every laugh she gave felt genuine. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Rachel stealing glances at us. Her smile had grown tighter, her laugh less frequent. Jake seemed oblivious, but Rachel's discomfort was palpable. When our entrees arrived, I decided it was time to escalate things. "Sophia," I said, my voice loud enough to carry, "have I mentioned how much I've enjoyed working with you? You've got an incredible eye for detail. It's no wonder everyone in the industry respects you so much." Her cheeks flushed, and she smiled. "Thank you, Eric. That means a lot." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough to make it seem intimate. "You're really something special, you know that?" Sophia laughed softly, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I could feel Rachel's eyes burning into me from across the room. The final blow came when I asked Sophia to dance. The restaurant had a small live band playing in the corner, and a few couples had taken to the floor. I stood and offered Sophia my hand. "Care to join me?" "I'd love to," she said, her smile radiant. As we danced, I made sure we stayed within Rachel's line of sight. I didn't look directly at her, but I could feel her watching, her gaze like a physical weight. Sophia's laughter filled the air as we moved to the music, and for the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely free. Then, out of nowhere, I heard Rachel's voice. "Eric." I turned to find her standing at the edge of the dance floor, her expression a mix of fury and desperation. Jake was nowhere to be seen, and for a brief moment, I wondered if he had abandoned her the second things got uncomfortable. "Rachel," I said calmly, stepping back from Sophia. "What a surprise. Can we talk?" she said, her voice tight. I glanced at Sophia, who raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. "I think we've said everything we needed to," I replied. Rachel's eyes darted to Sophia, then back to me. "Who is she?" I smiled. "This is Sophia. Well, let's just say she's been a breath of fresh air." Rachel's face turned red, and for a moment I thought she might start yelling. Instead, Rachel clenched her fists, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? You brought her here to humiliate me." I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Doing what, Rachel? Having dinner? Dancing? I don't see the problem." She stared at me, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to find the words. Finally, she muttered, "You're unbelievable," and stormed out of the restaurant. Sophia looked at me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "I take it there's some history there?" "You could say that," I replied, offering her my arm. "Now, where were we?" We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the man Rachel had tried to reduce me to. I didn't hear from Rachel for the rest of the night. After she stormed out of the restaurant, Sophia and I stayed for another hour, enjoying dessert and a final glass of wine. It felt good. Liberating even, to focus on someone who made me feel respected and valued instead of second-guessing every word or action. By the time I dropped Sophia off at her apartment, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. "Thank you for tonight," she said, leaning in the open car door. "No," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Thank you. I haven't had this much fun in a long time." Her smile widened, and for a brief moment, I felt something stir, something I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Rachel called. I stared at my phone as her name flashed on the screen, debating whether to answer. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her stew in her own guilt. But another part of me, the part that wanted closure, knew I needed to hear what she had to say. "Eric," she said the moment I picked up, "we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone calm. "Talk about what, Rachel? The fact that you've been sneaking around with another man, or the fact that you can't seem to handle it when the tables are turned?" She sighed, her frustration evident. This isn't about last night. I want to know what's happening between us. Are you seeing someone now? Her voice wavered slightly, and I could tell she was struggling to hold it together. I don't think that's any of your business, I replied. You made your choices, Rachel. I'm just following your lead. There was a long pause, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I didn't think you'd move on so quickly. I laughed bitterly. What did you expect? That I'd sit at home waiting for you to come back from your dates with Jake? You lost the right to expect anything from me the moment you betrayed me. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. Then what did you mean to do, Rachel? I asked, my patience wearing thin. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you wanted to have your cake and eat it too. Well, guess what? That's not how this works. She didn't respond, and for the first time, I realized just how powerless she sounded. The confident, calculating woman who had laughed with Jake across the table was nowhere to be found. I have to go, I said, ending the call before she could say anything else. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started spending more time with Sophia, and the connection between us grew stronger with every passing day. She wasn't just beautiful. She was thoughtful, supportive, and ambitious in a way that made me admire her even more. We started meeting for lunches during the week, talking about everything from work to our favorite books. By the time our third official date rolled around, it was clear that this wasn't just a rebound. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly being seen. As for Rachel, her attempts to reach out grew less frequent. At first, she tried to call and text regularly, sending messages like, "Can we talk? I need to explain. I miss us, Eric. Please don't throw this away." But as the weeks turned into months and I didn't respond, her messages became less frequent, eventually stopping altogether. Through mutual friends, I heard bits and pieces about her life. Jake, as it turned out, hadn't stuck around for long. The excitement of sneaking around had faded once the reality of Rachel's broken marriage set in, and he had moved on to someone else. Rachel, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces. The friends she used to host wine nights with weren't as eager to support her after the truth about her affair came out. Her social circle shrank, and the lively, confident woman she once was seemed to fade into the background. One evening, about 6 months after that fateful night at the restaurant, I found myself walking through the park with Sophia. The air was crisp, and the trees were beginning to change color, their leaves painting the ground in shades of red and gold. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Of course," I replied. "Do you regret it? Moving on so quickly, I mean." I thought about it for a moment, the cool breeze brushing against my face. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. Rachel and I were over long before I realized it. Meeting you just reminded me that I deserve more than what she was willing to give." Sophia smiled, slipping her arm through mine. "Good, because I think you're worth it too." As we walked beneath the fading light of the setting sun, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Rachel had tried to tear me down, to make me feel small and insignificant, but in the end, all she had done was show me how much better my life could be without her. Some people spend their lives chasing what they've lost. Others realize that the best is yet to come, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future.